welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going to break down a really significant document, Presidential Executive Order 14180. It was signed January 24th, 2025.
Right.
And this isn't just, routine. It's a very direct, hard look at FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency.
Absolutely. The title itself tells you a lot. Council to assess the Federal Emergency Management Agency. And what we want to do for you today is really unpack what this new council is being asked to do and, what it means structurally.
Okay.
Because the language here, it's strong. It basically claims FEMA isn't doing its fundamental job.
Okay, let's jump right into that context then. What's the core problem that's driving this whole review?
Well, the order paints a pretty stark picture. It mentions FEMA spending, or rather obligating, nearly $30 billion in aid each year for the last 3 years. Huge sums.
Wow, yeah.
But then it says, despite that, the administration believes FEMA has left, and I'm quoting here, vulnerable Americans without the resources or support they need when they need it most, especially after things like Hurricane Helene.
So, massive spending, but perceived failure? That definitely sets the stage for demanding some big changes. Let's get into that rationale, the why behind this assessment right now.
Section 1 really lays out the case. It says FEMA needs to drastically improve, that's the phrase used, its effectiveness, its priorities, and its competence.
Drastically improve. Okay.
But what really stands out is this suggestion that the problem might be internal. Like, the order explicitly asks for an evaluation of whether FEMA's own bureaucracy is actually harming its ability to respond effectively.
So the system itself might be the obstacle, not just, say, the scale of the disaster.
Exactly. Like, the machine itself is slowing things down.
And goes further than just bureaucracy,
Yeah.
right? There are some pretty serious ethical and political charges mentioned. Why put those specific sensitive claims in an EO about disaster relief?
Yeah, that's a really critical point. The order talks about serious concerns of political bias in FEMA, and it includes this extremely serious allegation. It cites a former FEMA responder who claimed that managers told staff to actively avoid giving help to homes of people who supported Donald Trump's campaign.
That is quite an accusation to put formally into an executive order. It suggests the administration sees this potential bias not as just a one-off, but maybe something more systemic.
It certainly frames it that way.
Yeah.
And it seems to be part of why they feel such a deep review is needed, beyond just, normal oversight.
And there's another major point in that rationale section, isn't there? Something about mission focus.
Yes, absolutely. Loss of mission focus.
Yeah.
And this connects directly to money. The order claims FEMA has diverted resources and staff way beyond its traditional disaster relief role.
Diverted to what, specifically?
It specifically calls out spending well over $1 billion to welcome illegal aliens. That's the quote used.
Wow. Putting a number like that over $1 billion and linking it to such a politically charged issue in this specific context, it really forces the council to look hard at what FEMA should be doing versus what it is doing.
Definitely. It uses that point to frame the need for this review very pointedly.
So the overall message is, Americans need a fast, effective response, and crucially, an impartial one.
Precisely. And that's why they're calling for this full-scale review by people described as highly experienced to recommend not just minor fixes, but potentially big structural changes, all aimed at boosting national resilience and maybe trust, too.
Okay, so we've got the why. It's a big why. But how are they actually going to do this? Who's on this council?
Right, the how. Section 2 sets up the Federal Emergency Management Agency Review Council. Let's just call it the council. It's capped at 20 members, so relatively small, meant to be focused.
And the leadership says a lot about how seriously they're taking this.
It does. The Secretary of Homeland Security and the Secretary of Defense, they are mandatory members, and they're the co-chairs.
So Defense and Homeland Security leading it. That definitely elevates it.
Absolutely. And then there are the non-federal members. They need to be distinguished individuals with a range of expertise.
What kind of expertise are they looking for?
Well, the obvious ones are there. Disaster relief, emergency preparedness, federal-state relationships. But interestingly, it also specifically lists budget management.
Budget management. Okay, so that confirms it. This isn't just about response times or delivering water bottles.
No.
It's a fundamental look at the finances, the priorities, how the money's being spent, and if the whole model is fiscally sound.
Exactly. It's a deep dive into the structure and the finances. And their main task, Section 3A says, is to advise the president through key advisors like the National Security Advisor and OMB Director on FEMA's ability to handle disasters capably and impartially.
There's that word again, impartially. Seems like a key word for this whole thing.
It really does. It's woven throughout the mandate.
All right, let's get into the core of it. Section 3C, the actual questions this council must answer in their report. These seem pretty demanding.
Oh, they are. Very analytical. For example, they have to assess how well FEMA actually responded to disasters over the last 4 years. Not just generally, but looking at staffing levels, too.
So a performance review of the recent past.
A detailed one. And then they have to compare FEMA's performance against what states, local governments, and even private companies did in those same disasters.
Comparing timeliness, supplies, getting communications back up.
Yeah.
Basically benchmarking the federal response.
Right. Is the federal effort actually better, faster, more effective than the others?
And then there's this historical research piece, which sounds unusual.
It is quite striking. The council is legally required to research and detail how disaster aid worked before FEMA even existed.
Before FEMA.
Yes, and also before FEMA was moved into the Department of Homeland Security after 9/11.
Hold on. They're requiring the council to look at a time when there wasn't a big federal agency like FEMA in charge.
That's what it says.
That sounds like they're not just asking how can FEMA do better. They're asking, do we even need FEMA in its current form? Could we go back to something else?
It certainly opens that door. It forces them to consider completely different models, potentially models with much less federal control, which ties directly into the next big question.
Which is about the role of the states, right? Section 3.6.
Exactly. This may be the most fundamental question in the whole EO. Should FEMA be purely a support agency, providing supplemental help when states ask for it? Versus what some might argue, it's become an agency that sometimes seems to supplant state control, taking over the disaster response.
So it's forcing a debate on federalism during a crisis.
Yeah.
Who should be in charge? The feds or the state and local governments on the ground?
That's the core tension. And the council can't ignore it. They have to look at the public debate around FEMA reform, analyze the arguments for and against different structures, including the legality of potential changes.
And how do they make sure they're getting the full picture, not just the view from D.C.?
The order is very specific about that. They must solicit input from a wide range of people Americans actually affected by disasters. Tribal governments, researchers, the private sector. It has to be grounded in real-world experience.
Okay, so they're asking these huge fundamental questions about structure, fairness, money. You'd think this would take years. What's the actual timeline?
The timeline is, well, it's incredibly fast. The first public meeting has to happen within 90 days of the order.
9 days.
And the final report, answering all those complex questions we just discussed, is due just 180 days after that first meeting.
6 months for that level of review, including historical research and comparative analysis.
6 months. It's ambitious, to say the least. And the council itself only lasts for a year unless the president extends it.
So it's designed to be quick and decisive. Get in, assess, recommend changes, and get out.
Seems that way. A focused effort aimed at potentially significant reform.
So let's pull this all together. EO 14180 isn't just tweaking FEMA. It's launching a full structural examination.
Right.
Driven by some very specific politically charged claims about bias and misspent funds.
Yeah.
And it seems aimed squarely at questioning that fundamental balance between federal power and state control in disasters.
It really forces a reconsideration of FEMA's role. Is it a leader or a helper? And can it be trusted to be impartial? The goal stated is to ensure the next response is effective, impartial, and respects local authority.
And maybe, for you listening, the really provocative question here is about the ultimate goal. Is this just about making FEMA better? Or, given that mandate to look at pre-FEMA models, is this potentially signaling a move towards a very different future for a federal disaster response altogether? Maybe a much smaller federal role.
That's the big structural question hanging over this whole process. What does national resilience look like in the future, according to this administration? It's something this council has to grapple with.
A lot to think about there. Thanks for breaking down EO 14180 with us.
Always interesting to dig into the details.
We'll catch you on the next deep dive.